Hello, everyone. So, as you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and
You rock.
Thank you so much for the 100 bits motivator. I appreciate it. Good luck with your Wi-Fi adapter problems. And on Twitter, I posted a little poll asking what people wanted to hear me talk about, and it was imposter syndrome and FOMO, fear of missing out. So that's something that we're going to talk about. So we're going to explain what imposter syndrome is, the different types, and how to deal with it and how to beat it. And we're backed up by Scientific American, APA, The Imposter Syndrome, by Paulina Rose Clance, PhD. So, if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's also called fraud syndrome, and it's a psychological phenomenon where people are unable to internalize any accomplishments. So back in 1978, clinical psychologists Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes found that highly achieving individuals constantly feel like they have the inability to internalize any of their accomplishments, and they have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud by those around them. They feel inadequate, they feel incompetent, and that they're a failure despite any evidence on the contrary. There's external evidence of this competence, such as promotions or compliments from other people, but those who have this phenomenon in this syndrome are convinced that they're frauds and they don't deserve the success that they achieve. And if there is any proof of success, it's dismissed as luck or being able to pull the wool over someone's eyes. A lot of people who fall into imposter syndrome are those who have a tendency towards perfectionism or a fear of failure, and they constantly undermine their own achievements, saying like, oh, it was nothing, or it was easy, or anyone can do it. And it debilitates people. It makes you incredibly stressed out at work, at school, in your social life. It gives you low self-confidence, and in some cases you can feel deep shame, anxiety, and depression as well too, if it's a symptom that pervades everything in your life. So just very quickly, some of the ways that you can get over this is be mindful of your negative self-thought and negative self-speak about these things. So when you are starting to say, oh, I'm not perfect, or I failed at this, there's no reason for me to continue, or everyone's giving me compliments and they just don't know how easy this really, really was. Being able to look into yourself and realize that that's happening to you is important to be able to start to get over imposter syndrome. So it's something that you might not even realize that you're experiencing until you start noticing these patterns inside of yourself. So Dr. Valerie Young found 5 subgroups of people who suffer from imposter syndrome. There is the perfectionist, the expert, the soloist, the natural genius, and Superman, Superwoman. She wrote a book called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. This has built on decades of research into imposter syndrome and these fraudulent feelings that high achievers have. So one of the main ones is the perfectionists. They set extremely high goals and expectations for themselves, and even if they constantly meet them, they're still going to feel like failures, and any small mistake or hiccup makes them completely question their competence and what they're doing and why. And whether this person realizes or not, a lot of the time they're control freaks and they have a really horrible problem with being able to delegate tasks. And even when they do allow other people to take over projects or parts of projects, they feel like others haven't done it correctly or didn't do it in time or skipped out on too much, and they just redo that section. And they feel like they need to be working 100% of the time, and they have to be 100% perfect. So if that sounds a lot like you, and success might rarely be really satisfying because they feel like they could have done much better or much faster. One of the best ways to realize it is you have to take your mistakes in stride and look at failure forward as part of the learning and growing process of life. Force yourself to start a project, even if you didn't do all the research you could have. You don't have to be, for instance, the best streamer on your very first stream. A lot of the time, most of the beauty that comes from streaming is being able to see, hey, I started off on a laptop without a microphone, and now look at me. Like, I've really built up a nice community. I've built up really high quality YouTube videos, and I have my own little niche in the content creator space. So being able to look at the bigger picture and then start narrowing down and really looking at every little achievement and being proud of where you are and where you've grown as a person. There will be never a perfect time to start something, and nothing will ever be 100% flawless because we're humans, and imperfection is part of what makes a lot of people beautiful, because it makes you unique and it makes you human. If you were perfect, you would be like a computer or a cyborg, which I'm sure plenty of people would like to be, like myself, but it's not possible. So that also kind of bleeds into the Superman, Superwoman subcategory. These people push themselves to work way harder than anyone else around them. They need to succeed at everything in life, and they are stressed out when they aren't constantly accomplishing something at the top of their field or the top of their personal goals. And these people also feel like huge phonies when it comes to dealing with other colleagues or coworkers, and they push themselves to measure up in their own mind to these other people. So a lot of the time they will stay later at the office than they really need to. They'll come in earlier than they need to. They will work through lunches. They're these people that say, like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, even though they might be someone who really does need 8+ hours of sleep a night. They never give themselves that. Someone who feels incredibly stressed out when you aren't working, and you feel like hobbies are a waste of time. You feel like just lazing about once in a while is a waste of time, and you feel shame when you aren't doing something for work or for school. And you also feel like you haven't earned your title or your degree or any sort of social know-how. So, you know, sometimes it's like, oh, we love Auntie Jacqueline. She is so wonderful. She always remembers everyone's birthday, everyone's anniversary. She sends us all these lovely greeting cards. And Aunt Jackie might be like, but 5 years ago, I forgot Grandma's birthday, and I didn't send a card in time. And I was on vacation, and also Grandma understood, and she was fine with it because she got it 2 days later. But like, I'm horrible. I'm not that person. I don't remember everything. I'm not the best. That's a somewhat simple but effective way to look at it. From an outsider, it's like, you do way more than I do, sending greeting cards and making sure you call great Uncle Bob every week to check up on how his dermatologist appointment was. Like, no one else does that. And she was like, yeah, but I asked him how his dermatologist appointment went last week, and I forgot that 2 weeks ago he told me he's not going to it last week. and I'm just a failure. I didn't do it right. I messed up. So that's an example of someone like that as well too. So these are people who are workaholics and addicted to being like absolutely just the best. Not necessarily perfect, but like constantly hitting these goals and constantly hitting it. And as soon as they don't do it, they like shut down. And a lot of the time they're addicted to the validation that comes from it. So like, oh, she's always in the office. She's always there whenever you need her. She always works through lunch. She's so helpful. And they get addicted to being known as that person. A lot of that comes from external validation. So if someone doesn't thank you for the greeting card, if someone doesn't thank you for working through lunch and finishing their deadline for you, all of a sudden you feel like, I didn't do it right. And that's why I didn't get that superwoman stamp of approval. And take constructive criticism more like seriously and professionally rather than personally. So if someone like jokes around with you and says, you forgot that this is my 1-year anniversary with my fiance or whatever, and you didn't send me a card, Aunt Jackie, haha, you're usually so good at that. That usually devastates someone like that. Whereas normally someone be like, you know what, I did forget, I'm sorry, I'll write it down on my calendar, next year you're gonna get one. And you just move on and you learn from your mistakes and you build from your mistakes. So yeah. You feel so attacked right now, I'm sorry. Oh wow, that's me. So we have a few more subcategories and they all kind of blend together. Some of them might feel like they work with you or is more like you than others. This one definitely is something that I had to unlearn from myself. The third category, natural genius. If you struggle at something, that means you're not good enough and you should just stop. You're used to skills and achievements coming really easily, and as soon as you have to put in any effort, or if you failed once, you basically tell yourself, well, this is proof. I'm an imposter. I'm not that smart. They judge their competence based on the ease of learning a skill rather than their efforts. And if it takes a long time to master something, they're really shameful about it. And the internal bar inside of you is way too high, just like perfectionists and just like Superman and woman. But they don't just judge themselves on that, they also judge themselves on being able to get things right 100% on the first try. So a lot of these people would be someone who had a track record of getting straight A's or gold stars in elementary school. Frequently told as a child you were the smart one in your family or in your friend group. You don't like the idea of having someone mentor you because you feel like you can learn it all on your own. And when you hit a setback or a failure, your self-confidence just shatters and you feel really shameful and you don't go back and try that thing again. And you avoid challenges because it's uncomfortable to try something if you haven't experienced it and tried it by yourself before. So for these people, it's relearning what smart means and relearning what achievement means. There's no natural genius, natural talent. Sometimes it's just luck, sometimes it's a fluke, and sometimes it comes from your training and your learning and your education and knowledge that you subconsciously have built your whole entire life. And so when you try something new and you get it right the first try, you're like, oh yeah, that's me. And then you don't realize that it also comes from learning from your friends' mistakes and then being like, okay, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way, and then you get a hole-in-one in golf on your very first try. If you don't practice the muscles, of course you're not going to know how to putt properly. Of course you're not going to know exactly how to get that right angle. So being able to reframe how you encounter and tackle problems and issues in life is really important. And that's how you kind of fix that. And hone your skills rather than just not doing them because you're not good at it. No one is good at anything right off the bat. And when people are, it's, like I said, the subconsciously they've been building it up by watching other people or learning about it, or they might have other interchangeable, interdisciplinary skills that have made them be able to be good at it. So I've been streaming for a really long time. And because of that, I'm decent at research, I'm decent at a bunch of different types of video games, and I know how to socialize with people. 10 years ago, I was horrible at it because I was like such a hermit, and I was really introverted and incredibly shy and had low self-confidence. And a lot of the times that does still pop up in life, but I know how to kind of like fake it till you make it. And now I help run the New York City meetup for streamers, and I feel comfortable talking to people and being able to say like, hey, tell me about yourself, and oh, this is what I do, and it's really great to have you here. And I genuinely do like those conversations, but 10 years ago I would have just probably not even gone to the meetup. I wouldn't have been one of the people help organizing it, especially because I would have had this idea of, well, I'm not a social butterfly, and I'm not an event planner, and I'm not an organizer, so why should I do any of that? You have to teach yourself things, and you have to learn that it's okay not to be perfect the first time. So this builds into something called the expert. And I bleed into a lot of these categories when it comes to imposter syndrome. I think the expert really hits me pretty hard because a lot of my discussions on stream are about information technology and psychology. And because those are pretty heavy skills and topics and industries that have decades of research at them, and they have a lot of really wonderful people who have been building it up for years and years, and content creators galore who are really well known for doing these things. I look at them and say to myself, why should I do it? I'm not an expert. I'm not perfect. I'm not Superwoman. So an expert feels like they need to know every single piece of information before they start. That builds a lot into the perfectionist subcategory. They're really hesitant to ask any questions in class or in a meeting to clarify things because they're afraid of looking stupid because they don't know the answer already. And they measure their competence based on what and how much they know and they can do. And since they believe that they will never know enough about a subject, they fear being exposed as unknowledgeable, inexperienced, a fraud, someone who's just hopping on the bandwagon, those kind of things. So, like I said, I feel that a lot with my psychological discussions and my tech discussions. But I've realized that as long as I say, hey, this is what I'm speaking about, it's a lot of my personal experience, these are peer-reviewed scientific papers and research that are backing up what I'm saying. This is what I'm presenting as of December 2017. And then here we are in May 2019. For instance, one thing that I love talking about is the Maslow hierarchy of needs, because I thought it was a great way to introduce how to take care of yourself. And recently, in April of 2019, Maslow's pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, is based off of a misreading and is basically seen as pseudo-pop psychology science. And now I look back and it's like, oh my gosh, I've talked at so many panels and I've talked to so many social workers and psychologists, people who have PhDs, who are also content creators, YouTubers and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I talked about at a mental health panel. And I'm like, they must have been thinking 2-3 years ago, how basic is this person? They know nothing about psychology. If they knew, if they were an expert, if Jess was an expert, she would have known that it's unscientific, it's outdated. And I never heralded it as like the end all be all. It's more of like an introduction to psychology. There's this triangle, this pyramid, and at the bottom is like homeostasis, and it's like physiological things, just basically making sure that you're well fed and well rested, and you're warm or cool enough. And then the next one is security and safety, the next step, and that would be like having a home and living in a non-war-torn country, things of that nature. Those are basic needs. And then there's a second tier, and these are your psychological needs. So the third step would be your belongingness, being loved by others, having friends, having intimate relationships, good relationships with your family. It doesn't have to be perfect, but more of like, yeah, you're my dad, and I appreciate you being my biological father, and we might have not had the greatest time growing up because you are a flawed human, but for the most part, you made sure clothes were on my back. Thanks. Those kind of things, like being able to get to that realization and being okay with it. So the fourth step in the in total, it's like the second one in the psychological needs, is called esteem. So having prestige, having a great job title, being accomplished, being well known in your friend circle. Hey, if you ever need someone to take pictures of your event, go talk to Jess. She knows great photography tips, and you could probably commission her too if you're short on time and you don't want to get like a professional, you want to help out a friend who's an artist. And then at the very top of the triangle is your self-fulfillment needs, according to the hierarchy of needs. And it's your self-actualization, achievement of your full potential, creation of art. So streaming would be at the top of that. Like being able to say, hey, all of these other steps are pretty much filled in for the most part, and now I'm going to create art based off of the type of person I am. So that's how I would explain it psychologically. But now there's like a bunch of research that like management firms and businesses have been using this pyramid, and it just has totally destroyed the way that a hierarchy works in companies. That's partly because people just look at like really easy graphics and they're like, this is perfect and this is exactly how I need to live my life. That's not true. It's a guide that you kind of like remember in the back of your head and use it as a baseline, and then make decisions based off of that and the hundreds of other things that should be influencing you. Life isn't black and white. So it's not like you shouldn't be a streamer if you don't have a stable job. It's probably a good idea to have a stable job before you start streaming and then like putting it onto your community that like, hey, I need to make rent. Rent is $600 a month wherever you live, and I need you to pay for it. Like, a lot of people probably don't like hearing that or like doing it themselves, but for others, there's full-time content creators, there's full-time streamers and YouTubers, and they make it work. So technically your safety and security isn't fulfilled because you don't have a traditional job, but it is because you're using your self-actualization and your creativity and your artistry to be an entertainer and a content creator, and this is your lifestyle. So that's why the pyramid doesn't always work, but you shouldn't look at it as a rigid process. Just like any sort of guideline in life, you should look at it as a guideline. And guidelines, they're not rulers, they're more of like strong rope. And rope can bend and move as well too. And it's also a really good segue into my tattoos. So I have the BioShock chain tattoos. And one of the bigger picture reasons why I got them was because chains are really strong links, obviously. And they're ways to bind things together and hold them in a big group of objects that are very strong and heavy and don't always work together. Don't fit into a perfect box. You have to put it on this big, huge dump truck or something, and you use a chain to help hold all that together. But sometimes the little links in the chain break, and sometimes that's a good thing because you need to replace the chains because they're older. So these chains, these links would be like rules and regulations. Certain things used to be illegal and now they're legal. Certain things used to be legal and now they're illegal. Slavery, for instance, it used to be the backbone of a lot of a lot of countries' economic growth. And now, for the most part, in developed worlds and developing worlds, it's not the done thing anymore, because we've realized that it's not fair to treat other human beings this way. Obviously, there's still slavery in various degrees in various countries all throughout the world, but it's much better than it used to be, because we've grown as a society, because we've realized that the chains that we use to bind us all together, using slave labor, wasn't right. And so we've done something else. We've built our economies and our political systems in a different way. We got rid of those chains, we broke them, and we put new ones in place. So, going all the way back to imposter syndrome, I've used Maslow's hierarchy of needs to try to explain like basic things about psychology and homeostasis and self-actualization. But when I started seeing these articles, for a split second in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm a fucking fraud. I was using pop psychology to explain all of these things, and I am horrible. But it's not true. These are newer revelations. People have been doing research about this for a few decades, and they've kind of realized, like, hey, actually, this pyramid isn't really right. And then also, Maslow probably never really made this pyramid. Oops, I messed up. That kind of thing. So that's the expert. Don't shy away from applying for jobs or majors or graduate school degrees if you don't meet every single requirement. Even if you've been in your role at work or in your social groups for a long time, you feel like you don't know enough and you're just skating by because you're the one who knows the most, but not the most you can. Do you feel like depersonalized when people say, oh yeah, you're the expert at that, and you're like shocked by that? Of course, a lot of these feelings sometimes aren't related to imposter syndrome. It's just more of, if this constantly happens to the point where you don't feel good about yourself for no good reason, you should start looking into seeing if you suffer from this type of psychological phenomenon. And then finally, one of the last subcategories for imposter syndrome is called a soloist. Soloists feel like they need to accomplish everything on their own. So there could be a YouTuber out there who does amazing videos about how to build Lego. But you're a Lego YouTuber yourself, and you refuse to look at the competition. You refuse to look at this person who's been doing it for 10 years because guess what? I can do it myself. And if I need to ask for help, that means I'm a fraud. And that's not true. People who feel like soloists, they feel like if they ask for help or ask for collaboration or clarification, it means that they're a phony. And they are filled with independence to a fault. It's great to be independent, but not to the point where you're your own island. Humans are social creatures. We're social animals. It's good to bounce ideas off of each other. And there are streamers that I've talked to at conventions where we don't stream the same thing at all, but just being able to be like one-to-one, hey, what do you really like about streaming? I like connecting people and I like making people feel good. Hey, that's what I like doing too. How do you do it? Oh, I read tarot cards. Oh, I build Lego. Oh, I play Star Citizen. And it's like, I don't do any of those, but we have the same goal in common. That's awesome. And just being able to build up and learn from those things, the soloist wouldn't be able to do. They were just like, no, I got this myself. I need to accomplish things on my own. I don't need anyone's help. And even if there is ever a time that they request help or clarification, it's more of like, hey, I read this on the syllabus. I just want to make sure, is this worth 10 points or is this because the writing isn't very clear? It's more of like that rather than, You know, this says it's worth 10 points, but I feel as though it's much more work than that. Maybe I'm going about it wrong. Could you explain to me how I should bullet point out this essay instead? Going up to the professor and asking in that way instead. So, there's so much within imposter syndrome that bleeds into each other. So I don't feel like I suffer from natural genius anymore, especially since I'm out of traditional schooling, but I think I do suffer a little bit from perfectionism and expertism, and maybe once in a while a little bit of superwoman and a little bit of soloist. And that's very evident in my PsychologiQuil discussions. I don't do them very often because I am terrified of being wrong. And I've realized that I'm not, and I'm speaking from my experience, and I'm using expert opinions and articles and research to back me up. And if I am wrong, like with the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, that's okay, because we learn from our mistakes. We fail forward. And if you're someone who has a specific profile where you're like, that's me to a T, or if you're like me, where you bleed into like 3, 4, or even 5 of the different subcategories, you're someone who struggles from self-confidence, and you're totally not alone. Within all the research about imposter syndrome I've done over the last few weeks, over 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at one point in their professional careers. And that happens from a promotion, that happens from starting a new job, that happens from a department getting reorganized, and you're like, I don't deserve this success, or I don't deserve this raise. Like, what is going on? It's okay to be kind of questioning yourself. It's good to evaluate yourself, but not to the point where you make yourself worried sick and you feel shameful of the accomplishments that you make, and you're comparing yourself to others and you're judging yourself so harshly. You should be your own best friend. You should be your best advocate, and you should be someone where you look in the mirror and be like, you are amazing and you work hard, and some days you have off days, and that's okay, because on your on days you kick ass. And I've been someone who's been really, really working hard at doing that, and sometimes it comes off, I feel like I feel a little phony, and sometimes I might feel like I'm faking it till I make it, or I'm overly confident, but I don't really think I am. I think I'm just loving myself as much as I deserve to be loved. Because if I was in a relationship with myself, if I was my own big sister, I would sing my praises every single day, and I would back myself up constantly, because those people in my life deserve that. So why wouldn't I? Hi Violet, hi Motivator, thank you. Hi Yazzie. Can't fail your goals if you don't have goals. Stop it, Guan Yu. So a few things. How do I break out of imposter syndrome? How do I stop making myself feel like a fraud? Failing doesn't mean you're a failure. Failing is good. It means that you are learning something. It means that you are growing as a person. You see kids on the playground who run around, they fall, they scrape their knee, they get right back up because they don't want to miss out on the fun with their friends. They don't want to be the last person at the swings. They don't want to not go down the slide 300 times that afternoon. And you need to have that kind of child-free innocence and playability in life as well too. To a point where it's like, okay, you might have tripped and fell, and you might have sprained your ankle. Okay, that's a little more serious than a little scrape. So you might have to, like, whoa, I'm going a little too fast. I'm a little over my head here. Let me take a step back. Let me do some self-care. Let me take care of my ankle. Metaphorically, of course. And let me reevaluate. I'm running around while like hopping on one foot, for instance, it like metaphorically, let's say you're doing that. You're like flying blind going into this new career, and you feel like you're failing way more often than you should. And it's like, okay, well, let me take a step back. Let me reevaluate. That's perfectly fine. But don't get to the point where it's like, I failed once and that's it. I'm done. I need to quit this job. I need to move out of the city. No one is ever going to hire me again. There's very few times where that actually is going to really affect you. Maybe in smaller cities and towns, but failing forward teaches you far more about a process and teaches you the value of hard work and determination and tenacity and resilience and resolve. Resilience is such a beautiful value to have. If there was only one value in my life that I would say I strive to have every day, it would be resilience. Secondly, another thing you could do, don't compare yourself to other people. You aren't them, they aren't you. Comparison over. It's that easy. You can kind of like look over at your friend and being like, okay, where are we here? Oh, you're doing better at that. I'm doing better at that. Okay, but we're building. We're still doing our own thing. I look at people who have only started streaming for a few months and they're partnered on Twitch, and like I look at that and I'm not angry at them. Like, good for them. But I'm not there yet. And it's like, I've been streaming for over 4 years. Why is this not happening to me? And it's like, well, there's plenty of reasons, actually. You've missed a few opportunities here and there. You've gone on long hiatuses. You've changed your content a lot. You've changed the times that you stream a lot. Like, Jess, you've just done all these crazy variables. Of course, like, things are going to be odd compared to someone who, like, streams 4 hours at the same time every day for 6 months straight, who has great production value and plays a specific type of game or one game. Like, of course they're gonna grow more than me, who sometimes takes 3 weeks off in a row when I'm working full time. Like, duh. It's the same as like a TV show. If it's like you're trying to compare something like Game of Thrones that have been on for like 8+ seasons versus a small indie show that only has had 3 episodes, and the 3-episode person is like, why don't I have millions of people watching me? It's like, you just started out, or you don't have the marketing background and the power behind that, and you're a different type of show. This one is like fantasy, politics, and you're about dirty jobs or something, and like more about like real life technical things. So comparison is the thief of joy, as Theodore Roosevelt said. Don't beat yourself up. Focus on you. Focus on what you can accomplish, what you have accomplished, and your current goals and what you're working towards. And that's what your energy should go to. Also, the definition of success is subjective. I think I'm actually pretty successful on Twitch, but I'm not partnered. But I have a really loving and kind community, and I appreciate the conversations that we have, and we make silly jokes like #blame Chris Jones, and those are the things that matter to me. But they might not matter to someone else. Someone else might be like, oh wow, Jess, you've only raised $1,337 for St. Jude. And it's like, that's $1,337 more than they had yesterday. So it's like being able to reevaluate yourself and having new definitions of success, of failure, and seeing how subjective it is really important as well too. And a lot of people who have imposter syndrome are people who are ambitious, who are high achievers, who have so many accomplishments under the belt. So it's not just people who are just starting out. It's not people who are kind of mediocre. It's everyone in between. It's people who just started today, people who have been doing it for 20+ years in their life, who feel, oh, do I deserve to be here? That kind of feeling. And sometimes fear is a great fuel. It pumps up your adrenaline. Being fearful of doing something wrong, being fearful of being laughed at, realizing that when you go to the gym, most of the time people are really focused on themselves, because people are pretty selfish, and they just kind of look at themselves and like their own friend group and what's going on. They're not going to notice you on the treadmill. And even if they do, the majority of the time it's like, wow, that's really awesome that this person has the confidence to be able to go out and like kick ass on the treadmill. I haven't been on the treadmill in months. Maybe I should do that. And then that's about it. Even when it's like, oh, you trip in public, or you start going down the street and all of a sudden you realize you're going northbound when you're supposed to go southbound. No one's paying attention to you. You just turn right around, you pick yourself up, and you keep going. And maybe for a split second, someone sees like, whoa, that person just turned around. And then they're going to forget right about it, because it's not important. It's just a blip in life. And even if they do remember, they're a stranger, it doesn't matter. So, acknowledge if you feel like you have imposter syndrome tendencies, fraud syndrome, this psychological phenomenon. This is not recognized by the DSM, but this does recognize that there is this low self-esteem and sense of failure that comes from imposter syndrome that can be a subset of depression. So that's something you really need to look out for if you are someone who's suffering from imposter syndrome. It can manifest into something heavier, like a depressive episode, or anxiety. Like you might be too anxious to go to work, so you call off, or too anxious to go meet up with your friends for whatever reason, so you stop hanging out with them. Don't hinder yourself. Don't shackle yourself to your fear of failure. Reframe your thoughts, having a lot of positivity, faking it until you make it. Look at yourself in the mirror and smile. That's how you start. Like, just look at yourself and be like, yeah, that's me. And the next day, you say something like, I love myself. I love you. And then the next one is, you're gonna kick ass today. And just constantly saying that to yourself and constantly believing it. Reframing your mindset is really important. And sometimes it's helpful to share with friends. Just be like, man, I feel like such a failure right now. Like, I have this new job and I'm so in over my head. I don't think I belong here. And your friend's gonna be like, girl, what you talking about? Like, you've just got your master's degree and you are amazing and you've been working in this industry for 15 plus years. Like, this is just like your old job, but better, because now you're the director of sales. You're gonna kick ass. And it's like, huh, yeah, you're right. So leaning on your social group, either your internet friends, your bar buddies, your cousin that also does the same career as you, helps a lot too. Just being able to vent and be like, I feel really shitty. And it's like, and then when your friend says that to you, you'll be like, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Why is that? Because you shouldn't be feeling that way, because you're awesome. Talk to mentors. Talk to someone who was your director of sales, but now they're the vice president of sales, and ask them, hey, how'd you do this job? And what kind of things do you think that I should be doing differently now that it's 2020 versus 1980 when you first got this job, for instance? And people love talking about themselves, and you will build a better bond with that person as well too. Remember what you do well, recognize your own expertise, realize no one is perfect. And it's something that kind of flies under the radar. Sometimes you just feel negative and you don't realize it's imposter syndrome. And once you realize that, you take a bunch of steps back, and it's not like, oh man, it's not that I've had a shitty project. It's actually because I don't think I'm worthy of this project. Oh man, I might be feeling like an imposter right now, and trying to balance like, wait, am I in over my head, or do I just not believe in myself? And finding the difference between that and building yourself up to be a better person every day is just what I'd like to leave you with. So hopefully that was helpful. Imposter syndrome sucks. Feeling like a fraud sucks. Failing sucks. But it's okay to fail. You learn from it. You build from it. And you can potentially be a mentor to someone else in the future, being like, hey, I did that back in 2015. It really sucked. Maybe 25 is different, but just so you know, maybe there's a better way to do that. And you're like, huh, wow, because of your failure, you've taught someone else something interesting. So, I'm not an expert. I'm just a mental health advocate. I have a psychology degree. I have a mental health first aid certification and a no stigmas advocacy certificate. So I like talking about these things because I suffer from some of these things, or some of my really close friends and family do too. And I talk about my experiences. I find really great peer-reviewed scientific articles to back up my claims. And if I mess up, I will let you know if there's new research. But that's the gist of JessyQuil's PsychologiQuil. So, thanks for listening.